Hi everyone, my name is Ashley and today I will be presenting my needs assessment with you all. The purpose of this needs assessment is to explore what challenges the homeless population faces, particularly in the Inland Empire of Southern California. In short, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, defines homelessness as not having stable, reliable shelter. By exploring the needs of those who find themselves homeless without reliable shelter, it can be determined what resources need to be developed to help put an end to this issue altogether. The specific issue derived from the research into this topic appears to show that as the inflated housing prices in California continue to rise, so too does the number of homeless individuals and families in the area. Shelter is a basic human necessity, and without it, many other needs are not properly addressed. For children, for example, the lack of stable housing can lead to unsuccessful development. It has even been found that children who become homeless can suffer greater neglect when compared to their sheltered counterparts. Without stable housing, many individuals neglect their health and wellness. As White, Ellis Jr., and Simpson state, homeless individuals frequently lack a usual source of care. More resources are needed to transition individuals and families out of homelessness long-term and not just provide short-term solutions. In order to appropriately evaluate this issue, we will be discussing how the data was collected for this presentation, including a literature review and the research questions used during interviews. We will then go over the results and key findings of the data collected, followed by the recommendations, including interventions to address issues and sharing findings. We will then end this presentation by reflecting back on the needs assessment process as a whole. We will first begin with the data collection process. The data for this assessment was collected via interviews with professionals in the field as well as homeless individuals, resources found over the internet, information gained in peer-reviewed journals on the subject, and researching the stance government is taking on the subject. Professionals such as MSWs were selected to be a part of the interview sample due to their close work with the homeless population in the community. One of the two that were able to be interviewed, the first has over 13 years of experience in many different niches within micro social work, but has most recently worked in the healthcare field for many years. This person was able to provide insight into how homelessness affects an individual's ability to receive adequate care. The other MSW interviewed has been working with homeless families for over a decade and was able to provide information related to specific information about the homeless population in the area, such as race, ethnicity, and background. Stories about what leads many of his clients to homelessness. The co-director who was interviewed for this assessment has been running a transitional housing shelter for homeless families in the community for over 7 years, and so is able to provide a more macro-level view on the issue. During the course of the interviews with these three individuals, rapport-building questions were asked alongside of the more core questions. In this slide, you can see what questions were asked to each of the interviewees. Aside from the interviews, a comprehensive literature review was conducted to help shed light on this topic. Peer-reviewed journals, internet newspaper articles, the government websites were all used to collect data. Some of the more noteworthy literature discovered includes a peer-reviewed journal about the rapidly increasing housing prices in Southern California. Another is a newspaper article showcasing the importance of this topic in politics as a candidate for governor attempts to solve the issue of homelessness through institutionalization. And another piece of literature that was impactful was HUD's Continuum of Care document highlighting many of the demographics of the area being covered in this needs assessment. Now we will review the results and key findings from this data collection process. The results revealed some surprising facts. Overall, these include that the majority of the homeless population in the Inland Empire is non-Hispanic, and of those, they are mostly African American and European American. During the interview process, one of the interviewees mentioned how most people are only 2 paychecks away from homelessness. If you were to lose your job right now, how long would you be able to keep yourself afloat? One surprising finding from the data collection demonstrates that a strong portion of the homeless population found themselves there not from substance use or mental illness, but simply from encountering negative circumstances. One not so surprising fact that was collected in the data was that homeless individuals do in fact neglect their health and well-being simply because it is not a matter of importance compared to the need for shelter. When an individual finds themselves homeless, it appears they allow their well-being to fall to the wayside. Financial literacy was a topic that came up with both the program co-director as well as the MSW at the shelter. According to them, many of their residents simply have no financial literacy skills whatsoever and struggle to budget not only their money, but also their time. Some of the key findings relate directly to the interview questions asked to each interviewee. When asked about the gender and race or ethnicities of the clients at their agencies, all but one interviewee answered mostly male for gender. This is consistent with the data collected from HUD and is interesting to consider as a large majority of shelters available for the homeless are aimed at females and families, not males. All three interviewees mentioned that the majority of their clients are non-Hispanic, with the only exception being the MSW from the housing shelter, who coincidentally was the same one who answered less males than females. After asking how they bridge the gap between the services they notice in the community, the co-director mentioned how they provide food bags, clothing bags, and hygiene kits every 30 days to the homeless in their community, whether they are a resident in their program or not. Another key finding from the interview came from asking the co-director about the funding of her program. She replied that less than 20% of their budget is spent on overhead expenses. They have such a strong volunteer base that they are able to keep their costs low, allowing them to provide more to the community. After considering the data collected, there are certain recommendations which I feel would benefit the homeless population in the Inland Empire. One of the interventions I believe will address some of the issues facing the homeless population is having more options for single males to find shelter, whether it is emergency shelter or transitional housing. As well, I feel strongly that integrating financial literacy courses throughout a student's educational career would greatly decrease the amount of homeless individuals and families in the local community. Although there has been some contention about this in the recent years, I believe that having a livable wage would benefit the community as a whole. While easier said than done, making this adjustment to our communities will find stronger citizens because of it. Especially important in Southern California, decreasing the cost of renting or owning shelter would allow for more people to afford to leave the streets for sufficient housing. It will be appropriate to deliver the final presentation to the agencies which donated their time to provide accurate and honest data for this needs assessment. To share the completed findings with these agencies, they will be contacted to determine their preference for having a personal presentation of the final assessment or to have the final presentation sent to them via email. Having given some of their very busy time towards the completion of this assessment, it is important that they have the opportunity to view the final presentation and observe how their assistance can potentially benefit the community they serve. Throughout the course of this needs assessment, I have learned many things, not just about my community, but about my passions as well. Completing this needs assessment has allowed me to grow in a variety of ways. It's forever changed my future assessment plans in that I will no longer shy away from collecting thorough data. I learned many lessons while completing this assessment, the most important of which being time management. The schedule of many MSWs and others working in this field is limited, and so it is important to stay on schedule. While the data has shown me a lack of certain resources for the homeless population, I gained the knowledge of just how many resources are currently available. Compared to what I thought was available at the beginning of this project, I have found so many more. I believe that a part of what made this assessment successful for me was the passion I have for learning more about homelessness and financial stability. This created a drive in me to learn as much as I could. Unfortunately, I did face barriers while completing this project, and most of them stemmed from my personal life. From the time this assessment began, I experienced loss in my family and have had to perform quite the balancing act. All these experiences, however, have helped to shape me into a more competent social worker, which I appreciate beyond measure. Thank you all for a well-rounded semester, and good luck.